Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good, everything's working.
Okay, we are live on YouTube now.
All right, we're getting close. 2-minute warning. Christine, all right, it is 5 o'clock and we're ready to roll. Everybody set? Okay, being 5 o'clock, I'm going to call this May 4th special meeting of the City Council to order. Ask the city clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Carling?
5 o'clock.
Here.
Ready to roll? Everybody set?
All right. Councilmember Coomer?
Here.
Councilmember Monroe?
Here.
Vice Mayor Warner?
Here.
Mayor Marchand?
Here. Okay, well, very good. Well, this meeting is being conducted pursuant to provisions of the Brown Act and recent executive orders issued by the governor to facilitate teleconferencing to reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission at public meetings. The City of Livermore has met all of the applicable noticing requirements, and the public is welcome to participate in this meeting. I'm going to take a few moments to explain the process we'll be using tonight. We'll be using a Zoom meeting platform and YouTube. This allows members of the public to participate by submitting public comment through YouTube or the Zoom question and answer feature. The Zoom and YouTube meeting links are available on the City of Livermore website and on the agenda. When participating in tonight's meeting, one comment may be submitted per person, per item. Comments should be no more than 500 words. If you submit multiple comments for a single item, the last comment submitted will be read into the record and the remaining comments will be added to the meeting record. The public comment period closes at the conclusion of the comments being read in to the record. Please note, comments should be submitted when the item is announced and include the item number at the beginning of the post. So now we're moving along in the agenda. Item number 2 is the opportunity for the public to address the City Council regarding the special meeting item. To the question of the City Clerk, do you have any public comments at this point?
Have we received any public
We've
comments?
not received
via
any
Zoom?
public comment on either Zoom or via email.
Okay, well, very good. In that case, I'm going to close the public comment period and bring it to the special meeting item. This is discussion and direction regarding city council virtual meetings, norms and values. Take it away to the staff.
All right, good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. My name is Mark Roberts. I am your city manager. Tonight, we wanted to present a number of items to you related to virtual meetings and get your direction so that we could update your standard practices and your rules as they relate to virtual meetings. As you recall, you have adopted rules for your in-person meetings that govern essentially all of the facets of those meetings and give direction on essentially where they're held, when they're held, what your calendar is, how to participate in those meetings. All of that is laid out in your rules. As you noted, with the COVID-19 crisis, the state of California has issued additional guidance, rules, and orders related to the ability to have virtual meetings. So this evening, we wanted to walk through a number of areas that pertain in particular to virtual meetings and get direction from you so that we all, as your staff, understand essentially how to ultimately facilitate the virtual meeting. So this evening, I'm going to start with this overview. Then Jason Alcala is going to give us a quick update sort of related to where these fit into the rules. Then Doug Alessio is going to walk us through an overall presentation, walking us through a number of different items. And finally, your city clerk, Marie Weber, will be here for additional questions and in particular related to things like the publishing of the agenda, how we handle comments and other items if there are specific questions related to those items. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to your city attorney, Jason Alcala, to get us kicked off.
Certainly. Thank you, Mark. This is Jason Alcala, your city attorney. You have adopted your rules of procedure back in March of 2019. Those rules of procedures anticipate that you would have live council meetings and do not take into account the order from the California governor or the shelter-in-place orders by either the state or the county. We have adopted certain rules of procedure moving forward in response to the corona pandemic. What we're looking for your guidance today and your direction is how you'd like to proceed going forward. What we'll ultimately do is return to you, possibly as early as your meeting on May 11th, coming up next Monday, to adopt your interim rules, which will suspend certain portions of your existing rules, those mostly dealing with the procedure, how you interact with the public, your alternatives to speaker cards, the 500 words or 3 minutes, that's changed as well. But when we conclude this presentation today, I'll post a slide for you to review, and then I'll highlight those sections of the rules that will technically be revising and returning to you for adoption during this COVID-19 pandemic and these existing shelter-in-place orders. With that, I'll turn it back over to Mark.
Thank you, Jason. And up next, we have our Administrative Services Director, Douglas Alessio, who's going to walk us through the PowerPoint presentation. He'll share his screen and walk us through, first of all, a quick overview of all the items that we're going to talk about, and then we'll circle back and go through them one at a time and see if we can get some consensus, and you can provide direction to us on how you'd like to address each of those items. With that, Mr. Alessio.
Thanks, Mark, and good evening, Mayor and members of the council. This is Doug Alessio, your Administrative Services Director. I'm going to run through a very short PowerPoint that provides some context for this evening's discussion. So we'll just get into it. The first slide. Hold on. And PowerPoint is acting up on me.
Meeting platform.
Do you have a copy that you could put up? Because it's not allowing me to control it.
Oh, there we go. It's up. Was up.
Yep, it was up and not letting me.
Yeah, it was up there for a moment.
It wasn't letting me scroll through the pages. So I think, do you have a copy handy, Murray? There we go.
I do.
There we are.
So Doug was going through a very elaborate process of actually showing what happens when there's a failure with a staff person's actual presentation. It was meant for illustrative purposes only.
You're covering all the bases. I appreciate that.
If we go to the second slide. So your current process is that we broadcast the meeting in on three different platforms. We use Zoom to produce it and also broadcast it. It's broadcast on TV 30 if it's a regular meeting, and it's also broadcast on YouTube currently. We take public comment four different ways. Before the meeting, via email or via Google Docs. There's a link in each agenda to a Google Docs tab where you can take and make your public comment directly from the agenda packet. During the meeting, we currently accept comment via Zoom, Q&A, and YouTube. Now the next slide. You can't get it to move either?
It has gone to the next slide. It's just taking a moment on YouTube.
I was watching in Zoom. So we selected Zoom. They're a leader in video communications, and there's a high level of security available. Initially, as Zoom was being used during the pandemic, there were some concerns about security features. Those have been addressed. We actually use Zoom not as a meeting, excuse me, but as a webinar, which allows additional security features. We also chose to broadcast on YouTube. YouTube is the second most active social media platform in the United States. And we wanted to be able to reach a wide audience. The decision to not choose number one, which is Facebook, has to do with you need an actual account with Facebook to watch Facebook Live. So we decided to go with YouTube, which does not require you to have an account. If you go to the next slide.
Lost somebody.
So there we go.
Oh, there we are.
All right. So here are some items that are for your consideration this evening. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but these are some of the items that we felt that you might want to provide some discussion and direction around, which includes the use of platforms, including YouTube, Zoom, TV 30 to stream the meetings. Procedural issues like should council members use the raise hand feature in Zoom when they wish to comment so the mayor can acknowledge them in an attempt to reduce or eliminate over talking. Right now, the mayor is the one person who is typically live in a meeting. Is that how you want the meeting conducted, or should all council members or should you have the option of being live or just a portrait being shown? And other items include the standard meeting time is 7 p.m. And if we're doing virtual meetings, is that still the time you'd like them to start? Such other items as uniform backgrounds and agenda publication timeframes. And there's one more. And another item to consider is public comment and the ways with which public comment can be facilitated. Right now, the city currently accepts comment up to 500 words. YouTube allows 200 characters per submission, which means that somebody could submit 2.5 submittals to make 500 total words. The city currently accepts public comment using email and Google Docs prior to the meeting, and YouTube and Zoom during the meeting. So that's it for the PowerPoint. And I'll turn it back to Mark.
So Marie, if you can adjust us back one slide, there we go. Why don't we use that one to facilitate our discussion? So with that, the first item has to do with the use of platforms and how we put information out. Currently, for example, on this evening's meeting, you are utilizing Zoom as the place where the meeting is actually being created, and then you are broadcasting on YouTube. In addition, when you have regular council meetings, like the last council meeting you had last Monday, we are also broadcasting out to TV30 to stream the meetings. So those are the three platforms that you are currently utilizing. And those all seem to be performing their function well. If you polled your staff, they would probably have one recommendation for you related to your platforms, in that the YouTube and Zoom platforms seem to be, we're using features in them that cause them to be slightly redundant. So for example, we could keep all three platforms, but then utilize Zoom to actually have the meeting. In other words, only the participants to the meeting itself, including staff and the council members, would be in the Zoom portion of the meeting. And the broadcast would go out to YouTube, where folks could comment and participate using that platform, and to stream your regular meetings with TV30. And that would work just like regular. So other than that one comment, that would help deal with at least the possibility of somebody being in the meeting that you did not expect. But more to the point, it would essentially reduce the redundancy of the channels back into staff as far as providing comment. So for security and comment purposes, that would be our one recommendation on the platforms. Of course, we're open to additional comments as to these platforms or others. And with that, I'd sort of turn it back to you, Honorable Mayor, to lead the discussion on this first item here.
Okay, are there questions at this point? As far as comments, let me get back to the.
I've got this, Bob Warner. I've got my hand raised. I didn't.
Okay, I had to get you back up here, and there you are. Okay.
So I
Yes,
like
sir.
a recommendation on this first one, and I presume we're going to, each of these icons that you've got on the screen there, we can discuss one at a time, and rather than try and go through all of them simultaneously with us. So I'll just start with the first one, which is I'd like your recommendation to have the meeting within Zoom and the public comment coming in through YouTube and email, I guess, if that's still going. The other thing that I would say is we should get to what are we aspiring to? And I would also suggest that if we're going to broadcast out through multiple channels, that the same image of the meeting be on those multiple channels. So for instance, it might be possible to put onto YouTube what is streaming out of TV30 would be an example, just so that we don't have multiple views of the same meeting.
Okay. Anybody else wish to comment at this point?
I had my hand raised.
Oh, I didn't
And
see
me
your
too.
hand raised here.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, Councilmember Carling.
I thought Bob's suggestions were just fine. I just had one question. I'm not a fan of Facebook, but I was just curious. You said you needed an account. Does that mean that it costs money to have an account, or what?
Facebook accounts do not have a cost to them. They just have a membership requirement. So you do need to go on and set up your portfolio to actually utilize the program.
one of the things, Councilmember Carling, about Facebook, I do not have a Facebook account. As I say, I'm a dinosaur, but I seem to do it well. But one of the things that I have gotten in the past is I get a lot of emails from people that want me to accept them as to friends on LinkedIn or accept them as friends on Facebook. So I get a lot of emails from people asking me to friend them on Facebook. And that's just something I haven't wanted to get into.
This is Bob again. I've got my hand raised.
You know what? The hand raising isn't coming up here for some reason.
Well, I think that,
And wait, give me a chance too. Mine's up too.
Yeah, okay, so for some reason, I'm not seeing the hands.
so maybe you're speaking to the second icon as to whether that works. But so here's what I would say with respect to the first thing on the platforms. I agree with the fact that having to have an account is maybe restrictive, but I do suggest that we at least advertise on
Here we
Facebook
go.
that we're having the meeting.
So, Councilmember Warner, that already occurs. So I looked into that this afternoon, and we do use the city's Facebook accounts to advertise that meetings are occurring.
And do we do it real time? I mean, it might be in advance, but do we also just say, by the way, it's happening?
That I'm not familiar with. Christine, do you know the answer to that?
This is Christine, your Deputy City Manager. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, City Council. Yes, we do, like Doug said, we do in advance notify and post the agenda with a link so folks can get in and see and read staff reports ahead of time if they're interested. Currently, we do not advertise moments before the meeting begins, but that is something that we could certainly do.
Okay, I see Councilmember Monroe's hand raised. So, okay, there's another screen that I was not watching. So figure this one out. Councilmember Monroe.
Okay, yeah, you have to look at the participant screen, I think, to
Yep.
see it.
I was looking for it
Just-
on the
Just
video.
a quick comment on Facebook, which is just that they don't charge you, while they don't charge you money for paying it, they charge you data, and that's perhaps more valuable than anything else. And I say that as someone who does have a Facebook account, reluctantly. I don't have a particular opinion in terms of YouTube, Zoom, or TV30. I would agree that it would be nice if what we saw were consistent. As long as people have access to some form, YouTube seems to be easy enough. I don't see a need for them to come into the Zoom meeting at all, provided it's easy enough for them to comment on YouTube. The one caveat there is that when we get to how people comment, which is I think the last item, I may revise that. So. But it's some balance between making it accessible and making it easy for the staff. Oh, I know. The other thing I was going to comment on is as we go forward, we should keep in mind that when we actually are in our council chambers, which of these is going to be something that we can use when we are actually meeting live with people in the room, because that actually makes a difference to me as well.
Yeah, I think the video quality that we get from TV30, I agree with Vice Mayor Warner that that doesn't have it's a very high standard, and to maintain that that consistent quality. So I think that that's still an important consideration. One of the points that I was also making, talking about public comment, it's I think important for the public to have the opportunity to provide information. And I think that's the real key for the public comment, is to provide information to the council. And that information can either be by email, as we saw last week. We got a lot of information, a lot of comments by email. And when those came in early enough, the city council members were able to read all of that, consider it. I think that that's where it has its greatest value, is when the city council has the time to consider their comments. So I would encourage people to use the email format to get those questions into us so that we have that information ahead of time.
So I see Bob has his, Vice Mayor Warner has his hand up. Can I
that.
respond though first?
Since you're talking right now, go for it.
Okay, well, so one of the things I believe is that, you know, sure, we've always had the ability to get the email comments in ahead of time.
Right.
What I believe is true from going live, you know, from the virtual meetings is that we're getting a new segment of the population who can comment in real time, although not in, not verbally. I would just like us to, as we're looking at the platform, as we're looking at all of this, I'd like us to just think about how we can continue being inclusive. What opportunities this has raised for us being more inclusive and how we continue that when this is no longer the norm.
Vice Mayor Warner.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that it looks like we're jumping to the next topic, which is public comment. Maybe we could put the screen up to public comment and continue on that. Do you want, or do we want to, where do we go next? But we're on public comment, so shall we continue on that one at this point?
Because obviously public comment is inexorably linked to the platform because it's how people get access to provide that comment.
Right, so I would just suggest that so the first thing, are we wrapped on platform and then go to this one? I would just like to suggest that we march through these things one at a time and just decide what we want to do. But is public comment the next place we want to go?
Sure, let's go there.
So then if I can make some comments on that, I like the thought of the real-time input and to make it easy for people to do that. And my impression is that YouTube satisfies all of that, that we don't need it through Zoom. Now, I do wonder, though, about this character limit and how we handle that on real time. And that if people have a need for it, they could submit through the Google Docs or the email. I mean, it strikes me that it's just as quick to type on your keyboard into one thing or another. So this 200 character limit seems to be a problem given our normal 3-minute.
Councilmember Monroe, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so I want to have the possibility of having people speak, and that might mean that they have to do it through Zoom. At one of the other meetings I was at, EBCE to be precise, that happened. The public comment was, it was a contentious issue. Public comment was actually limited to 1 minute. But it really makes a difference to me hearing the voices, you know, and having that opportunity. I'd like us at least to consider that as a possibility. And if that means it changes what kind of platforms we use, well, you know, take that into account as well.
Well, people can phone in, to your point, they can call in on the Zoom platform. I'm not certain with the YouTube.
Yeah, yes, I think the first question is that something we want to allow?
Nobody else, no other comments? Councilmember Carley, have your hand raised.
Yeah, for some reason, we must have lost internet for a few minutes. I haven't been on in on the conversation, so I lost track of where we are.
Councilmember Monroe is asking if we wanted to give people the opportunity to provide comment by phone and you know, through the Zoom platform. And I think if one of the considerations on that is that we would we would need to have them identify themselves because just for the sake of the security on the public comment, that somebody doesn't go off the rails. I know that Zoom has had some problems with that in the past.
Yeah, that happened in Lafayette, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's not a bad idea, but I think we need to make sure it runs smoothly with some of these other things we're going to incorporate. And see how it goes. I mean, maybe we'll get people right in and say, hey, they want to speak rather than write.
Vice Mayor Warner, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I'd like to second what Councilmember Carling said, is that I think it would be good to have the live input, but let's kind of crawl before we walk on, and let's get this thing, working well with what we have. But I do think it's something to aspire to, especially in the future. But maybe we defer exactly doing that or authorizing doing that for a little bit.
Okay, let's see. Councilmember Monroe, again, you have your hand back up.
I do. I'm working on lowering it as minute you call on me.
Okay.
Right. So I agree with my colleagues with the one caveat that as we're thinking about being as inclusive as possible, having somebody send in comments means that you have to be able to type at a reasonable speed. And we've already seen instances where people have said, wait, I tried to get that in and it wasn't enough time. So I think we need to be a little bit sensitive to that. The other thing that does is it really privileges people whose English is better than those speaking of being able to talk.
It's yours.
But for non-English speakers or for those for whom English is not their native language, I think it could be substantially more difficult. So I would like to see us move toward, and I think I haven't heard anything different from my colleagues, having that as an option.
What do you mean by having that? Define that.
Having speaking as well as writing being an option.
Okay, Vice Mayor Warner, your hand is up.
So I agree with Councilmember Monroe that there are lots of good reasons to allow the speaking in the real time. But what I haven't heard is to what time frame are you willing to let us get to that in? Is it the next meeting, or do we have another couple of meetings to work out all the other bugs?
Are you asking? I'm just going to jump in and answer. I don't have a time frame because I think that depends on how quickly the staff can work out the bugs. So I want to leave it flexible enough for them to do that with the idea that we're moving towards this with all due haste.
So it sounds like we may have 3 people that are going, we want to do it eventually, but I was just wondering, can we leave it at that at the moment, or do we need anything further to kind of let us get off this particular thing and move to the next?
Well, I think that as you pointed out, that you want to be able to crawl before you can walk. We're still coordinating all these platforms. We're coordinating that the public is getting used to how to comment. So we don't want to change too many things all at once. So let people get used to it. Yes.
Honorable Mayor, your city manager, Mark Roberts, would like to sort of have staff weigh in on this one, just to sort of explain what that impact may have on sort of our choice and use of platforms. If ultimately we do want to take audio, live audio from the public. And so with that, could I have City Clerk Marie Weber give us just a little bit of feedback, and Mr. Alessio, if you have some, if we ultimately want to, if not immediately, but at some point in the future, have audio testimony as well, does that limit or direct our use of platforms, or would that be something that would be completely independent of the platforms we choose?
Good evening, this is Marie Weber, your city clerk. It would require us to stay in the Zoom feature, allowing the public access to the Zoom platform. That is where we could currently do that, and we could start work on navigating what that looked like and how they could participate verbally.
But
So-
we can continue to get used to this platform, and we could gradually move into that space as people become more comfortable with the platforms that we're currently using.
So this is Doug Lesio, your Administrative Service Director. Just one comment about this is the idea that you would like to broadcast a singular view is in conflict with using Zoom as a place where people could enter the meeting and interact in the meeting, because then you would create more views for the public to see of the meeting than one uniform broadcast out. Is that correct, Marie?
That is correct.
Okay. Vice Mayor Warner, your hand is up.
Yeah, I would like to suggest that if we can always go back and open up the Zoom meeting when we want to get to the live comment. But in the interim, we don't have to, right? We can make it simple and go through, say, broadcast out to TV30 and YouTube. And then once we figure out going to the live comment, we can readdress the platform. So I don't know that we have to be using Zoom for people coming in at the moment. We're not going to be using live comment. And that's why I asked the question, how soon do we want to get there? If we're talking about trying to get it in 2 council meetings from now, then that's a different thing than if we say we want to get there in June rather than May. So it's important how fast we want to go there. And is this the key way we want public comment to come in, or do we want to, for the interim, keep it in the written format? So it's really important on time frame, I believe.
Okay. Well, again, I think that right now the public is getting used to these particular formats, so it may drop out naturally that which format the public prefers. And we may just try this for a few more meetings, see where we get the most information, whether it's by email, whether it's by Zoom or YouTube. And then later on move into which platform we want to expand and at what point we want to take public comment in real time, if you do want to do that. Councilmember Carling.
Yes, thanks. I think we're overthinking this. At least that's what I think. We only have 1 meeting in May anyway, right? I mean, the second meeting is a holiday. Is that true?
You have 1 regular meeting and you have 1 workshop.
Correct. Okay. So if we're talking, if Vice Mayor Warner wants to know when the first time we might do it, I suppose we could shoot for the June meeting. That would give the staff a month to work this out, and that doesn't seem, I don't know what staff thinks, but that doesn't seem like an unreasonable plan if we're talking about needing to know when we're going to move forward with this.
Councilmember Monroe.
Along the same lines, June sounds fine to me, but I'd also like to know what staff thinks in terms of what a reasonable time frame is for them to get to put this together.
Let's hear from staff.
So Honorable Mayor, I'm going to have our city clerk and our Administrative Services Director respond to that question about what a reasonable time frame to incorporate essentially audio testimony into the virtual meetings. Marie?
I believe the June 8th meeting would be a reasonable meeting to give us time to test one of the kind of wild cards is always YouTube and seeing how it translates over. Once we test in Zoom, to go ahead and test in YouTube as well, but I think we could get that done by June 8th.
Okay, and if not, the second meeting in June is fine, I would imagine.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor.
We've got a lot of stuff going on right now, and we're busy. So I certainly understand if that drops and staff needs to move to the second meeting in June, I think that's good. Vice Mayor Warner.
The second meeting in June is a reasonable time frame from my point of view.
Okay. Staff good with that?
Yes, so Honorable Mayor, would like to talk a little bit about how we handle submissions to the city council during meetings. So we've talked quite a little bit about items which are being submitted during the meeting. We're going to continue to allow those to be submitted in writing, and then those would be read during the meeting, as your clerk and her staff have been doing. The other question has to do with written correspondence, which is submitted prior to the meeting, all the way from, days before the meeting into hours before the meeting. And your staff has been working on this issue to provide you some options. At one end of the spectrum is to gather essentially written comments and to republish the agenda. That's a very labor-intensive item, and your staff would like to avoid that if there is an alternative method that gives the transparency necessary and the information to you all in advance. Because while the vast majority of items don't have a very large volume of comments, essentially any of your controversial or complex items, can have anywhere from a very few comments up to many dozen comments, depending on what the item is. And so with that, I wanted our city clerk to walk through a potential option of essentially providing you all with electronic copies of comments and essentially posting those to our website, and then gathering those and adding all of those so they would be in a distinct place as part of the record, as part of your ultimate city council meeting. And she could walk through a little of that explanation of how that would be a little bit different than what we're doing now. And that may take a little time to get in place, but ultimately would deal with essentially differentiating between perhaps a larger volume of written material that might come in before a meeting and that which is generated during a meeting and might actually be read. So Marie?
Good evening. This is Marie, your city clerk. One of the more recent ways we have been accepting public comment is through a Google form on the website. The link for the Google form is provided on the agenda, and when the user logs in, they're able to see each agenda item and select the one that they would like to comment to. They can select multiple items. They enter their name and email, and then they submit their public comment in a text box below. Those then come into the city clerk's office, and they are exported into an Excel spreadsheet. This makes it very easy for the clerk's office to sort them by item and deliver them to council and potentially the public in a very quick time frame. We would be able to go ahead and export that Excel spreadsheet, send it via email to council, and then also post that Excel spreadsheet on the website for the public to access prior to the meeting. This is a much less labor-intensive option than republishing the agenda with a supplemental packet. After the meeting, all of those comments would then, just like they are now, be added to the record to go on our permanent record from there.
That sounds great to me. What it ensures is that the public gets the same information that the council had, that all of their comments are part of the public record without having to republish the agenda. As you pointed out, it is labor intensive. But I think the key is that the city council gets that information. The public then gets the same information that the council did, And then all of that information becomes part of the public record. So I think that checks all the boxes and makes sure that we do have that complete transparency. I see Councilmember Carling has his hand raised, followed by the Vice Mayor. Councilmember
Yeah,
Carling.
yes, thanks. Are we anticipating lots more comments via this Google form than normal times? I don't know, what problem are we trying to fix here that's new?
So the problem is not new, but it is very traditional on items that have controversy that you get 20 or 30 or 40 emails or electronic documents, or in the old days, literally handwritten letters, in the 10 days prior to the actual council meeting. We publish, and then you get a stack of those that are the current process is when there is a noticeable number of those, we actually republish the agenda, which is very intensive. The purpose of republishing is to get that stack of information, whether it's a controversial environmental project that people don't like the EIR, or it's something with downtown, so that you can actually read through those in advance of the meeting. The alternative to that is, as you'll recall, is when the comments are relatively light. We've been providing those at your dais place at the evening of the meeting. And if it's 1 or 2 comments, that works. But once you get beyond that, it's not really possible for you to read through those and consider those. So the issue we're trying to solve exists now. We just anticipate it continuing into the virtual era. And the one thing that doesn't happen in the non-virtual areas, those are given to you in physical form. They're not read into the records. So we were trying to avoid having an evening where your readers have 20 or 30 comments that they read into the record during your council meeting. And that's the adjustment that we're trying to deal with. So to be very clear with the public, what items are given electronically to you in advance and how that's done, and what items are literally read into the record during the meeting.
Okay, I think that's fine, because I certainly don't want somebody to read into the record all the written submissions that we might get. So I think that's fine.
Vice Mayor Warner.
I think it's a good suggestion. I think the other advantage I understand of the Google Docs is it's more equivalent to the blue card form we have now, and it has the ability to collect information, some of which is required, some of which is optional, but it provides an even better documentation for what's going on. Is that correct?
Provides greater transparency. Ms. City Clerk, Ms. Weber.
That is correct, Vice Mayor Warner. It does allow us to have mandatory information and gather it very easily. It also really helps in the delivery to City Council that it sorts very easily. So it allows us to arrange them by item, so it's very easy for the City Council and the public to navigate through.
All right, Councilmember Carling.
Oops, sorry, I didn't lower my hand.
Oh, okay, Vice Mayor Warner.
So given the fact that it's better in terms of collecting even the required information, that it allows us to avoid having to read all of that into the record, I'm all for making Google Docs as the method for collecting the public comment in advance of the meeting. I think that what we've also done in the past is people can send us lengthy emails or whatever, but then they also are able to come to public comment and give a shorter version of it. So the question is, will we still allow somebody who submits something through a Google Doc to also do the impromptu comments as we've done in the public forum in the past?
I think that's a matter for the consideration of the council. Councilmember Monroe, you have your hand raised.
And lowered. I just
see
wanted,
the city
no,
attorney
it
just
was
popped
there.
up.
It was there. It was there. No, I just wanted to agree with that. You know, I'm fine with the Google Doc. I actually like the addition that Vice Mayor Warner said. And the closer we can mimic the actual council meeting in terms of the way people are allowed to submit comments, so in other words, the both and sounds fine to me since that's what we are currently doing.
I see the city attorney raised his, or you popped up to the top there. Mr. Alcala, did you have a comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. It was actually along the lines of what Councilmember Monroe had suggested. The comments through Google Docs would be coming in advance of your meeting, so that's one way to communicate. The governor's order does require us, as does the Brown Act, to receive comments before the item's considered once you start the meeting. So it would be, the person would have the opportunity to do the summary as Vice Mayor Warner had suggested. Send in the larger document, but then still speak within whatever constraints you provide, 200 words, 500 words, to provide those direct comments during your actual consideration of the item.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Further comments from the council? Okay.
Yeah,
Well, Vice Mayor Warner again, you're back up.
because we started off with the slide that's being projected, and then we went into the oral public comment, but we still have this question about the length that was out there for a few minutes ago. Is that really, YouTube is only 200 characters? Is that true?
This is Marie, your city clerk. That is true. It does only allow 200 characters, not words. So what we have been doing is allowing them to submit multiple comments on YouTube as long as it's one sequential thought, one after the next, and meets that 500-word limit.
Okay, that just strikes me as possibly painful. But because you had your other thing in there about you would only read the last comment. So it seems to me that YouTube might be universally accessible, but that strikes me as a problem to force people into multiple 200 characters when we're actually talking about a 3-minute time limit.
Well, I think part of the problem is there's no perfect solution here other than, once we get back to having regular meetings, then this all becomes a lot easier. But I think everybody's getting used to this new set of formats and these new platforms. Up until 2 months ago, I had never been on a Zoom meeting, and now I've gotten quite comfortable with them. So I think it just comes down to what the community gets comfortable with, and then we start to become more expert on those issues and those platforms.
Well, I agree, and I was just saying is that personally, I would find trying to get 3 minutes of equivalent stuff in 200 character bytes would be painful, but that might drive people to Google Docs. Now, Google Docs, you've got it here, is prior to the meeting, but could they use that during the meeting as well if they didn't want to do it in 200 character chunks?
This is Marie, your city clerk. That would be more challenging for us to be extracting and downloading those comments in real time. Currently, we've set a 12 o'clock noon time limit for submitting those, and then we turn them off. Doing them in real time would be much more challenging.
Well, then I guess where I'm getting to is if we might be eventually going to live public comments. And now, is there a character or word limit in Zoom?
Zoom, I don't believe so. They are allowed to submit a question and answer comment, and I think the nature of both of these features look similar to a chat feature, so it really encourages a shorter public comment, and then we've received much longer public comments via email and in Google Docs.
So I'm not sure I heard the answer. Is that if we went and had people submit to Zoom, can they? Is there a character limit on them?
I don't believe so.
So then that would argue leaving the Zoom input channel there for people who don't like doing things in 200 character chunks.
So your one, as was pointed out earlier, Zoom does create a number of opportunities. It does, however, of course, create the challenge of different views which the actual user can set versus having the city be able to pick a particular view and broadcast that out uniformly across multiple platforms.
So I think one of the real values that we have, one of the reasons that we broadcast the council meetings is it is transparency, so people can watch the deliberations of the council to see how we arrive at our conclusions. We're getting information from the public and from a variety of different methods by email. We all get phone calls, we get emails, we've got the Google Docs and the Zoom. But I think the real value of the council meetings is that the people see the deliberations of the council and how we got to the answer, that we didn't all walk in with the answers before the meeting, that they actually see this deliberation. So I think that's the real value that we have here. We're getting information from multiple channels. And I think all of that, how that synthesis ends up with the ultimate answer. And that's why people watch the council meetings. It's just that now they're going to have a different method of providing input, and they may need to provide a little bit sooner, or I don't know how difficult it is to type the 200 characters, hit send, and then type 200 characters, hit send, because it is a single cogent thought stream. So I don't think it would be that onerous. I don't think you have to log in each time you do it, but you would just write in that single thought stream and then send those multiple comments in. Obviously, Google Docs sounds better, and the Zoom Q&A. But I think the main value here is to see that deliberative process.
Honorable Mayor, I think your staff has the direction we need to start the process. It seems like perhaps a little more exploration on some of these issues might be in order. Using the Google Docs for essentially written testimony in advance of the meeting, and then the desire is to have a platform that is easy for people to use and for staff to use to ultimately have the 500 words submitted in the most streamlined way possible. So let us do a little exploration of our options because you're correct. It doesn't appear there's a perfect one here, but I think we hear what your objective to get to is on that.
Okay, so we have fumbled around enough to give you guys a vague idea of what we're looking for. And do you have sufficient direction to go off and figure out the best way to do this and then come back with this, say possibly first or second meeting of June?
Yeah, for that particular item. So I think we've now covered platforms and essentially submission of comments. So we've got those two checked off, and we're back to our other screen here where how are we doing with our raise hand feature? Do we want to continue to use that as the preferred method to have the presiding officer recognize other council members? Would you like that to extend to your staff as well? So that's the next item on your list.
I think once I figured out where the hand raise box was, I think it worked very well. As far as council member or staff raising their hands, I think that this choreography worked very well, that having the staff, I see the city manager just raised his hand. I've got Councilmember Monroe, you got a comment?
Yeah, which is, I absolutely hate the raised hand thing. Unfortunately, there is no better option. So what choice do we have?
Because otherwise everybody just talks at once, and it helps to have the person recognized, because then everybody turns toward them and they've got the floor. The city manager just disappeared, but Doug Alessio came back up. Doug Alessio disappeared. Did either the city manager or Doug Alessio wish to speak? Oh, there they are. And okay, city manager and then Councilmember Carling.
All right, so I think at least so far I'm hearing support for utilizing that particular feature.
Yes, I think that it helps to order the meeting. I think that works pretty well. Councilmember Carling?
Yeah, I agree. Thanks.
Then we don't end up with a free-for-all.
Okay, your next item is
John, before we go on, Mark, this is Bob Coomer. I don't have a hand in my toolbar tonight, and I have had the last few meetings, so I'll have to explore what to do about that.
Okay. All right, I see you right here. Councilmember Monroe.
Click on participants, and if you click on participants, it should bring up a sidebar. And at the sidebar at the bottom, there should be a raise and lower hand. See if that works.
Yeah, no, I'm there already, and it isn't, and it has been the last couple of meetings that I've done this. So
Okay, never
whatever that
mind.
is, maybe that's the one was saying. I don't know.
Okay, come back here. All right, so we're raising hands. I see the city manager again.
so yeah, it seems like we've finished up on that particular item. And I think our next item on our list that we'd like for you to provide some direction to us is whether council members will have their cameras on all of the time, some of the time, or none of the time when we are doing council meeting broadcasts.
What's the pleasure of the council members? Okay, Councilmember Carling.
I think all the time.
Okay, Councilmember Monroe.
I enjoy having it on when it's a small meeting like this. I like to see other people and I like to see their reactions. During a longer meeting, it's really hard to monitor your face and to, it's not like being in public. If I do this, you know, it looks weird. If I do this, it looks even weirder. Cameras are weird things. So I would say in a workshop, I would love to just see everybody all the time. In a regular meeting, I would like to do the council members turn on when speaking, because I do appreciate seeing while someone is speaking, their visual cues matter to me.
Okay, Vice Mayor Warner.
I agree with what Councilmember Monroe just said, is that I've actually, while we've been doing this, snapping some pictures with my camera of what I'm seeing. And I think people would appreciate if they saw that, would agree with Councilmember Monroe that cameras on all the time aren't beneficial. But while speaking, I think it works.
Please tell me you didn't get me while I was making faces at the camera.
Well, it depends on how much you want to pay me.
So, Vice Mayor Warner, one of our backgrounds is backwards. I'm not sure which one, but one of us is backwards.
I don't know. I'll go check it out.
No, you both look fine.
Well, so I'm looking at the background, and my Livermore behind me is a mirror image, which is supposedly what it's supposed to look like. I'm looking at the vice mayor, and his is the correct display.
But that's because you're looking at a mirror image of yourself.
Oh,
But the audience sees it just perfectly.
okay. So from somebody else, it looks right. Okay, so
Exactly.
very good. I'm good
Yeah,
with
looks
that.
right from here.
Okay, good.
You
All
know,
right, Councilmember Coomer, what are your thoughts on
You know,
video or not?
I'm comfortable having it on all the time, as if we're in a meeting. And if I need to get up and do anything, I'll turn it off, but honestly, I shouldn't have to. I should be listening and have the public able to pay attention to me all the time. So that works for me.
Okay, very good. So we keep the video on. Next one, Mr. City Manager.
All right, just to sort of follow up there, you had essentially the mayor, council members, Carling and Coomber all agreeing to keep the video on all the time. Is how we ended up on that one.
Yeah, and I understand it. I guess I have to be, since somebody's got to be here and provide all the lead. So I guess that's me. Let's see, I have two more hands, Vice Mayor, followed by Councilmember Monroe.
Well, Councilmember Monroe suggested that it be optional. Are you saying it's mandatory? That we're voting 3 to 5 and it's mandatory for everybody all the time, or is it an option?
I think I'm fine with having it optional. I mean, I don't. It's a matter of what the consistent view is for the public. But if somebody needs to get up and go get something to drink, they could just about put it on camera or on the photo.
I think the way we're producing this is not gallery view when it's going out, but it's speaker view. So with respect to the public, they only see when we're speaking, I believe.
Ms. Weber, is that the case? Mr. Alessio?
So as an attendee, I believe you can only see the view that's being broadcast. And so as long as folks are in the attendee view or in as an attendee, that yes, you would get control and they'd only see what was being broadcast, which would be when you're speaking, when you turn live, correct? If somebody were invited in to make a comment, they would be able to see other things. So where you were speaking earlier that you may want somebody to be able to use Zoom to give live testimony, they would then see things differently once they were in as a panelist and not outside as an attendee.
Okay, Councilmember Monroe?
So my concern, so I like the idea of having it optional. The only thing I really feel fairly strongly about is when we're speaking that we have our cameras on so that we can see each other speak. I also, I depend on the nature, in an informal meeting like this or workshop, I like the idea of having it on all the time. In the more formal council meetings, I'm not so sure, but the only thing I really feel strongly about is that when we're speaking, that we have our.
Okay, all right. Okay, next question. City Manager.
So Honorable Mayor, one addendum to that item there, and no one has raised this, but we did want to be clear is, as you know, it takes a village of staff members to ultimately support your meetings, especially when you have large and complicated items there. We would continue to display all of our pictures in the gallery view and then have our pictures up when we spoke. It's mainly because we're doing 2 or 3 things at once when we are testifying before you. We are often sharing our screen. We are looking at notes and doing a variety of other things, none of which is particularly photogenic. But we do certainly want to make sure that people know who we are and that we are speaking. So we certainly will have all of the staff have their appropriate profile picture on display. And wanted to make sure that that met with council's approval as well.
Sure. Anybody else? Works for me. Okay, seeing no dissent, that looks like that's a good one. As far as uniform backgrounds for all council members. What are the, I think that the background of the City Hall looks good. Councilmember Carling.
Yeah, I tried to, my iPad doesn't support virtual backgrounds. And I tried my wife's laptop, and I actually loaded the background that you're using, but then when I tried to use it, it said that I didn't have the right processor. So the processor in her laptop, this is a long story, is that I can't do it.
But you know what? That is a stunning quilt behind you, and I think that works very well.
And I've had the same issue here, quite honestly, very, very similar, I'll say. So we'll work on it this week.
Me too. My computer.
Okay, all right. But so if it works, great. If not, we don't have to have a uniform background. I think the main thing is that people understand that we are sheltering in place, we are following the rules, and we're still running the city. So I think actually it adds a little better flavor to it that yes, we are working from home. So I actually like the different backgrounds.
I can get Rufus to stand on my lap too. I'm like a big mastiff sitting there looking at him.
Well, and that adds
I can
it adds
get my
character to it.
best athlete.
It adds character.
Just make sure you don't throw them.
Councilmember Carling?
Yeah, I'm gonna lower my hand, sorry.
Okay, very good then. Okay, so it's not a big problem. If it works, great. If not, it just adds to our humanity. So I'm good with that. Uniform meeting times. We have been 7 o'clock for the regular meetings. We've got 5 o'clock for our special meetings and workshops. I think that works well. As far as the regular meeting time, I think 7 o'clock is, well, then again, nobody's going to work, so they should be home. But I think 7 o'clock is a consistent time from my perspective. Councilmember Monroe.
I'm just not sure what the plus and minus is to changing the time at all. I mean, having a different time for workshops could be confusing. I don't have a strong opinion. I'm just not sure what the rationale is for having two different times.
I think it's easier for staff. The staff's already here at 5 o'clock. So that's my feeling, and I'm all about making it a little bit easier for staff if possible.
So during this time, is there a problem with moving the regular meetings to 5 then? I mean, I don't care particularly. I'm trying to make sense of it.
I think that'd be a little bit more difficult because we've always had council meetings at 7 o'clock. So I would be in favor of keeping the council meetings at 7. And because then if people are working, if they are considered essential and they are working, it gives them a chance to get back to watch the meetings. Of course, now that we have the meetings broadcast on TV 30, people can get them on demand anyway. So with that, I see Councilmember or Vice Mayor Warner, your hand is up.
I think a couple of reasons for leaving it at two different times. One is it is easier for staff, but the council meetings could be longer. And starting at 5, that means you have to eat earlier. So I think 7 is better for the public and better for all of us for the longer meetings, but these workshops tend to be shorter. So I think that's another reason for making it two different times.
Good point. Councilmember Carling?
I agree. I think the way it's working now is just fine. 7 o'clock regular meetings, 5 o'clock for the others.
Okay, very good. Councilmember or Vice Mayor, did your hand go back up? Okay, very good. Agenda publication time frame, City Manager.
So to wrap on the other item, we would continue to have all of your regular meetings posted for 7 p.m. Special meetings and workshops, we would move to 5 p.m. if I understood the direction correctly. I see some nodding. Very good. All right. About a dozen years ago, we revised your agenda publication timeframe. The law requires us to publish an agenda generally 72 hours before the meeting. We, as a practice for your regular meetings, have been publishing your agendas 10 days prior to the actual meeting. So there are sort of two items woven together here. One is an acknowledgement that during this time Right now, when we are in emergency mode, your staff, because many of us are remote and actually wearing at least 2 hats, some of your agenda timeframes have slipped, especially related to special meetings or workshops, and we have not hit that 10-day goal. So the first item is to simply acknowledge reality and acknowledge the fact that as your emergency operations director, I would expect that to continue through this emergency, simply based on the amount of staff that we have and what we're being asked to do. The second question is whether this item, of course, was brought forward and voted on by essentially folks who are no longer on the council, whether that time frame is still particularly important to the council. Obviously, there's a push and pull on the time frames. On the one hand, we do wish to give those who come before you a timely way to make it through the process to get in front of you so that their item is heard, whether that be a mandatory item like a development-related project or an appeal or any of the other business that the public has to carry out in order to be before you. About 3 weeks prior to your actual meeting is the cutoff when all of the production has to start so that 10 days prior to your meeting, an item is ultimately before you. Our question before you on that item has to do with, is that time frame particularly important, do you believe, either to your deliberative process or to the community, that we should sort of try and maintain that time frame, especially when we go back to normal or hybrid meetings, and in cases when we can, even during this emergency? Or would an alternative publication date sometime during the week before your meeting, in other words, not necessarily Friday, the absolute minimum under state law, but some other date, perhaps midweek of the week before, be acceptable? Or is there a benefit to be gained from the process that we have now?
Vice Mayor Warner.
Well, it wasn't quite a dozen years ago because both the mayor and I were on the council when we made the change. And it really was driven at that time to give us adequate time to read everything. But what I've found since then, frankly, is that that's more time than is needed for me. However, putting it out that much in advance has given the community time to look at it. And I've had multiple conversations with people on several agenda items because they saw it. So I agree that we could move it, but I don't think we want to go back to the 3 days because that really meant that only gave people time to interact with the community over the weekend. So I'm good with the Tuesday or the Wednesday before the following Monday. And I suggest Tuesday just to give the community enough time to know that it's out there and for the conversations to occur.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that the Tuesday would be good. When we were getting some of these packets that were 800, 1,000, I've had 1,500 page packets, and those are brutal to try to get through on one weekend. So having a little bit of extra time is good. So I think a good compromise would be having on it maybe Tuesday, because then that gives us just shy of a week, but it gives the community a chance to look at it. And you don't just, I'd go over the packets on a Friday, and then I would have questions of staff, but I couldn't ask them Saturday or Sunday. I'd have to wait until Monday, and then everything is kind of a crunch. This gives an opportunity to think about the questions and then ask those of staff and give staff a little bit more time to respond. Councilmember Monroe.
Yeah, so that sounds reasonable to me. The only thing I would say is that in making the change, if there's ever an opportunity for some members of the public to talk about lack of transparency, they will take it. And this is that opportunity, making it shorter and making it harder for us. Why are you doing this? I think is a very reasonable thing to say. And one of the ways to think about this is to say that this also gives people a chance to act in a more timely fashion. So the fact that it's 3 weeks for the 10 days, this actually moves that up a little bit, maybe not a lot, but a little bit. And that can provide more flexibility, and that actually benefits the public as well. So I think it's that this is sort of a plus minus kind of thing in terms of thinking about it in terms of access. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, the point is that we're required to provide 72 hours. And granted, there's a lot of councils out there that that meet on Tuesdays or Wednesdays. But I think this is a good balance because it does give them almost, well, over twice as much time to consider it as required by law. So I think it's striking a good balance because it is grueling for staff to get this out that far in advance. Because, for example, we'll have a city council meeting and I'm doing my agenda review 2 days later for the next meeting. So there's really a lot of compression. So no sooner do we get through a council meeting, but within the next day or two, the staff has to crank out the next agenda. So it is very difficult. I think that starting on the Tuesday before, I think that's a good compromise.
Right, and just to yeah, I agree with you on that. Again, just making it clear that this benefits everybody, I think is the.
These are unprecedented times, and I know we're all sick of hearing that, but they really are. City Manager. Bob Coomber, did your hand go up?
I don't have a hand going up, but I turned my mic on there. So,
Okay,
but I am
saw that.
very comfortable with Tuesday. I just, if staff has changes along the way, there will be fewer of them, given that the length of time. It isn't out, 10 days, and we've seen enough addendums to staff packets where that comes in where we had to change it several times and add things and subtract things and so on. So Tuesday is a very good day for me.
Okay, very good. Okay, City Manager.
All right. That concludes sort of the list of things that we wanted to walk through this evening. So I want to, at this point, turn it back over to your city attorney, Jason Alcala, to walk through some of these items and sort of see where these will sort of be impacting and adjusting your existing rules.
Very good. Thank you, Honorable Mayor. Council members, this is Jason Alcala, your city attorney. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here to put up a PowerPoint. There we go. So based upon your guidance this evening, what we will do is we will coordinate and we'll start drafting some language for a resolution to return to you, ideally at your next council meeting on May 11th. These are the sections we would need to modify. What I would propose is that the resolution only identify modifications for this particular event during the COVID-19 pandemic while we are sheltering in place. The bulk of your rules of procedure will remain in place. However, we will make certain adjustments to your teleconference meetings, obviously to recognize the platforms and the direction you've given us this evening. Work with the notice and posting of agendas. Again, that deals with your remote locations. Your current rules deal with the old normal, which required you to post the agendas at your teleconference locations. Obviously, based upon the 2 orders that came from the governor, we no longer have to do that because the public is not allowed to participate from your remote locations. So we'll note that adjustment. With regards to citizens' rights, there's a number of sections that we will adjust. However, those adjustments will be limited to recognizing how comments are being submitted, both in advance of the city council meetings and how those will be packaged up through Google Docs, as well as how the public will comment in real time using the platforms that we've identified this evening, as well as the change from your ideal of 3 minutes to a word count. So these are the different sections we'll identify. Again, your rules do allow you to adjust your rules of procedure. We'll just make this a bit more formal to maintain the expectations both for you amongst yourselves as council members, as well as with the public, so they understand the expectations when they come before you to participate. Just want to let you know what you'll be seeing when we get back to your next meeting. With that, I will stop my share. If you have any questions, I'm available for questions. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to City Manager Mark Roberts.
Okay, I've got a question from Vice Mayor Warner. Mic on.
It wasn't, I agree with that. Now so there might be a few minor things. We're still going to keep the rule of they only submit one comment per
Item.
right? So we'll keep everything else will stay the same.
That is correct.
Good. And then once we're done with this, I wanted to ask some questions about some other ways we could use the Zoom meetings.
Okay, now's your chance.
Oh, which I can do that now. Is it, what we've talked about so far is the council meetings and the workshop. But I think we might also want to consider the equivalent of town halls where there's more interactive. And we might, I don't know how we also address the possibility of using these for office hours. And because we've also gotten into the norms and values of using social media. So I just wanted to toss it out there that those are two other uses of the Zoom meeting platform that I don't know if we consider it tonight, or is it another time we consider that?
Vice Mayor Warner, this is your City Attorney, Jason Alcala. We were preparing to bring that to you in March. We had actually prepared the PowerPoint presentation to review your means and norms relative to the use of social media, as well as to provide you with your required annual AB 1234 ethics training. If you desire, we can return with that at a later date. It's a little beyond our rules of procedure for our existing meetings, but I think there is an opportunity to have that conversation. If you'd like, we can actually add that to the agenda for your May 11th when these rules return, so you could have that conversation.
Well, I was, perhaps, I mean, if the others think it's worth, we get enough head nods on that, but I think we're looking at this platform and it has some really good capabilities for us to have a more interactive meeting with the community, and that maybe we should explore that as well. I don't know what other people think.
Councilmember Monroe?
In short, yes. I agree. I want as much stuff as possible. I can clarify stuff if you want.
Well, so I guess we're going to bring that back for discussion.
I think that's fine.
Me as well.
Okay, so I got to run the table.
So Honorable Mayor, let us take a look at the timing on when to bring that back. What I heard is everybody wants to have that back as an item. Let us take a look at the timing of your upcoming meeting and what's a little further into the future, and make sure that we don't create a unwieldy agenda for you on any particular night to keep you up particularly late. So, but we absolutely will package that and bring it back to you at the first time that we can fit that on the schedule.
All right, very good.
Those are the items that we have before you this evening. And these changes we will incorporate into your rules, as your City Attorney, Jason Alcala, noted. We'll tag those to this particular emergency. Then at a future date, as we get further through this process, we'll return to you to see if there are appropriate adjustments that are necessary to hold hybrid meetings. There may come a time in the future when it is perfectly legal to have meetings, to have people at your new meeting hall. But either members of the council, members of staff, or members of the public may not be able to attend those because of either health conditions, concerns about their health, or other items in the coming year. And so we might ultimately need to create sort of rules for hybrid meetings, those where there is a physical location, where some of the participants would be physically in the same room at the appropriate distance from each other, but some of the members might still be virtual. And we could certainly, I think we need, as your staff, a little more time to figure out what those, what problem we're solving. In other words, to get a little better definition of what meetings might look like from the state government's perspective. So we're not quite ready to discuss those with you this evening, but we do anticipate a need at some point as we further open up and physical meetings become part of what's permitted by law again. So with that, I'd like to wrap up the staff portion of this meeting, and Honorable Mayor, turn it back to you.
Okay, I've got Vice Mayor Warner has raised his hand.
So with respect to the hybrid meetings, I think that's a good idea, but in the past, we've had them, right, where people could conference in from other, or when they were on vacation or something, and there was an important meeting. So it isn't too much of a stretch to go to the hybrid, I would think. It's the real stretch is when we take public comment remote.
Well, I think that one difference is that previously, if somebody was on vacation, they had to post the agenda and be in a public space. We may not be allowed to do that. I mean, we're certainly not allowed to do public space meetings now as a hybrid. So I do think it's appropriate to look at this. And I don't think that what Mark is talking about mimics exactly what has been allowable in the past.
Okay, Vice Mayor Warner.
I didn't say exact. I just said it wasn't too much of a stretch.
A little bit different. As Councilmember Carling pointed out, I've had to post those in my hotel room before and allow public access. And I know people that have actually gone in and sat in on meetings. So just it's a little bit different, but we just need to make sure we cover all the bases. Okay, I don't see any more hands raised. I don't see any microphones on. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we adjourn to our next regular meeting, 7 o'clock on May 11th. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Good night. Thank you.
Yep,
Good night.
thank you.